Good afternoon. My name's Stuart. This is Jamie, my colleague, and we're from Autodesk, and we are going to attempt to show you the next 45 minutes some Smoke Mac and 3ds Max workflow, I believe.
I believe that's what we're going to do. One thing that I do want to just mention before we kind of get into the main bones of the presentation, because you've got me and Stuart for about 45 minutes, and we're going to run through a 3D and a full 2D comp and editing workflow. But on your seats, you've got these little cards to take away, so don't ever say we never give you anything. There's a little card that allows you to download the software that we're going to be going through, so you can kind of follow what we've done.
And it's got your home address on there as well, I think, as well.
I believe it's yours.
Okay, fair enough.
One thing I do want to mention, as it looks as though most people are younger than me and Stuart, you're probably on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter, then the tool that we're going to talk about is Smoke. That's the hashtag. If you know what a hashtag is, I don't, but I'm told that's a hashtag.
You're not cool with the kids, are you?
I'm not cool.
You're
I've
not
never
cool
been
with the
cool.
kids at all.
So quickly moving on. What I want to do is just quickly mention that the work that we're going to be using and going through is customer-based work. So it's not work that we've made to look shiny and pretty and work perfectly well. This is real-life customer work from a company called Hatch Studios. So if you want to see what they do loads of branding work for Apple. Have a look at these guys, hatchstudios.net, really lovely work.
It's really nice, and this is a little job that they've done specifically for us in this particular case, and really to kind of show off some of the things that we're going to be doing this afternoon. We've got a little list here. I won't read it out for you. I'm sure you're all capable of reading, but basically looking at how we can use the new Smoke on Mac together with 3ds Max to do some kind of non-linear editing and compositing workflow and take advantage of some of the passes that Max is able to export.
Yeah, so at any point throughout this session, as we're in possibly the world's noisiest room, if you can't hear, put your hand up, throw your card, or just throw something. Bottles of water are normally good. Try and get our attention.
No underwear.
Yeah, no. Kind of distracted me a little bit there. Anyway, yeah, so the tool we're going to be looking at is called Smoke. There's a free trial at the moment. It's a great little tool. Stu's going to do most of the hard work.
Well, I'm not sure if it's hard work, but
well,
work.
We make it look hard.
We do.
There's a couple of features that I want to pull out on this list that I think are worth mentioning. If any of you are doing 3D animation work or logos or idents, then you're probably used to working with file formats and rendering and saving, and even if you don't, just nod and pretend that you know what I'm talking about. But one of the things that I think is really good about this tool set that we're going to go through is its OpenEXR workflow. It's a file format we're going to talk a little bit about in a minute, but one of the strong points of this tool set is its OpenEXR file format. If you don't know what that is, it's basically George Lucas, or I suppose I should say Mickey Mouse's now.
Mickey Mouse's,
Mickey
yeah,
Mouse's,
as of a week ago.
It's their file format, so it's a really high-end professional tool set that you get with Smoke.
And it just allows you to pass a lot of metadata and information backwards and forwards between primarily 3D products, and in our particular case, Smoke, very easily. So instead of having multiple renders, multiple passes, you can encapsulate a load of things in and take care of a lot of the donkey work in one go. It's kind of quite nice.
Yeah. So what we're going to go through is a typical customer workflow. We're going to work with the concept and the storyboards, just have a rough idea of what this animated sequence is going to look like. So storyboards are really important, just to kind of rough it out and make sure that you're going along the right path. The next stage we're going to go on to is the content creation stage, where we just make something in 3D. We'll do a bit of kind of Wallace and Gromit stop frame animation. And then I'll pass it over to Stuart, who's going to do the final delivery, the comping, the color grading, and the editing, I hope.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah? You looked at me blankly then.
Some of that anyway, some of what you just said.
So just a reminder, grab the card, download this piece of software. There's some links. We're running out of time. Let's ignore the links.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like your style, I must admit.
So from that point, we're going to pass over to
We'll kick off on this first.
Mac.
So the workflow is going to be, we're going to start off on Smoke. We're going to do a little bit of prep work there, some of the animatic work. Put that across to Jamie. Jamie's going to be using the animatic as a kind of a storyboard, as a posing. He's going to do a couple of 3D-esque scene-y things. Yeah. He's going to give me some renders back, and we're going to start slotting those back into the timeline, back in Smoke, and see how we can use some of the comping tools as well as some of the editing tools to basically just get the job done. So if you haven't seen this before, this is the new version of Smoke. That's currently as a pre-release trial. You can download this for free up until about Christmas. After that, we'll be taking some money off of you for it, I believe. But up till Christmas, knock yourselves out. You can download this and run it on pretty much anything Mac-based that's fairly current. So, as I said, we're going to be quite pushed for time getting through some of this. So this is our basic interface. This is what we call our workspace. And it's kind of split down into a couple of areas. An area where we can arrange some media, an area where we can have our timelines. And basically this area here, our workspace, takes control of all of this. Now, just to put this in some kind of context, we've got some areas that are pre-laid out. So we're going to be looking at this first. This is our final playout. This is what the job actually looks like. And you can see that down here, this is represented, all these clips, these viewers are represented by a clip or a segment or a timeline. So just before we dive into the job proper, we're going to do play out the final and just give you an idea of what this is actually going to look like if I didn't keep swiping annoyingly to one side. A rather nice little animated job. In all honesty, we have no idea what the storyline behind that is at all. No. We're not sure what Dave is. We think he's was it a orangutan?
I'm going to go for a Yeti. In fact, let's do a vote. I reckon that was a Yeti. Who votes for Yeti or orangutan? So let's go for Yeti first. Nobody.
Nobody.
Brilliant.
I think orangutan is going to win out anyway. No. So this is the final play. A nice little animated job. Once again, done in 3ds Max. Most of the comping work done back here inside of here in Smoke. So really, what's the process of going through of sort of creating this? Well, every kind of job, including live action, but more really important on animation, starts with some kind of basic framework. So in this particular case, an animatic. And as Jamie, being a 3D guy, will know, the animatic really is like the backbone of the whole project, isn't it?
It is.
It is. I'm glad you said it is, because that makes my life a lot easier. So we've literally got here, on our desktop, we've got some clips. Now, this particular clip, this is going to be our sequence. This is what we're going to be editing into. We just sort of kind of drag drop, very graphical. And all these other elements, as we sort of kind of click through them, are basically things that we're going to be dropping into the timeline. Now, Smoke is nicely going to sort things out for us. Smoke is fully resolution independent. You can work up to silly sizes in resolution, bit depths, frame rates. It doesn't really care. It's going to help us put together all these different size boards. Now, the first thing that's going to get done is that we're going to have some audio here, and there's lots of different ways that we can edit things in. One of the nice things about Smoke, it's fairly unique, is this sort of very gestural way of working with clips between these two areas. Now, most editors normally just work from a source area down into the timeline. We've got nice functionality in here where we can actually start dragging elements back out in the desktop and doing a variety of things. So we're going to start initially by dropping down our guide track. So this is essentially our audio base that we're going to be using for this. Now, we've got a couple of markers in here to give us some clues about where we're going to be dropping some of these storyboards down. But essentially, the animator would initially have some kind of visual reference about what's going to happen with the action. Now, we can do this in several ways. You could have a big wall of storyboards that animators could come in and look at. What's actually probably a little bit better is that everybody has kind of like a common audio and visual reference that they can animate to. Would you agree with that one?
I would.
I got it right for once. So if we kind of look at this, just for a second, we're going to go into this view, you can see that this is kind of like a storyboard representing that opening initial shot, where he comes down from the title as you do this establishing shot in the junkyard, pan across into the garage with Dave and Gwen. Now, we could just sort of kind of edit this in and just sort of leave it literally to be a static reference, and then the animator has to make up his mind what he's going to be doing with this. What's kind of nice with animatics is that we can kind of give, especially in this context, use some of the animation tools to give the animator a rough idea of what the action kind of should be. Pretty good. Will you agree on that as well? I'm doing very well today. So in this particular case, we can edit in several different ways. The audio we just drop straight down, but we've got lots and lots of different ways that we can view this media. So if we actually just call up a view where we've got a more traditional source record view area here, we get a few more controls graphically where we can just go through and start to sort of go to some of our cue markers here. We can start marking some in and outs. So once again, this can be completely hotkey driven. In this particular case, I'm going to use some of the buttons here. We're going to say I want to mark an in point here. I'm going to go to our next marker. We're going to put an out point here. So now we literally have an area on our record timeline which we want to edit some of this into. Now in here, we can look at anything in our workspace. Just literally clicking down on this panel is going to display that piece of footage. Now from that point, this is only a static frame. This is kind of fairly big. This is 2.5K wide, and we're going to kind of edit this directly down into our HD timeline. Now, once again, we can drag and drop. We've got particular buttons that just basically edit these straight into those locations. Literally 2 or 3 ways of doing every operation inside here. But essentially what we've done now is we've taken that one static frame, and we've dropped it down into the timeline between those in and out points. So it's fairly sort of basic editing. Now, as you can see at the moment, we're just taking a sort of a fit into our HD canvas here. But like I said before, I'd like to give this a little bit of motion just to indicate to the animator what I want to do. So we've got lots of ways that we can start to animate or work with these segments within the interface. Now, we've got some things in here in our effects ribbon that have already been applied to the clip. This was a big clip fitting into an HD canvas. It's put a time warp on and a resize to fit that in. Actually, what I want to do to this is I want to give it some motion. So we can come into here, and in our effects ribbon, we can apply something we call an axis effect. Now, these are just effects that appear in a sort of a ribbon here, and each one of these has an associated editor. So we've got some very basic controls that we can use to manipulate this. But the real power of this is that on each tool inside of here, we've got access to an advanced editor. So we're now inside that editing module. You can see that we've got representation of our canvas, and this is basically our 2.5K still that we've got. Now, lots of things that we can do in here. What's worth noting is this is a full 3D environment. I mustn't do that too much because it really makes everybody go just a little bit giddy. We can animate in here. We can do things like keying. We can do stabilization, tracking, a whole bunch of things. But what's really nice is that we've got lots of different ways of doing this. We can work with this on directly on layers, or we can do something fairly quick with what we call the camera. This is kind of like a virtual rostrum. This is like a little 3D scene, and we can, as well as work with the layers, we can actually work with our cameras as well. I'm going to pop auto key on, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to literally graphically just zoom this up a little bit, just pan this across. And I want my my opening shot is going to be somewhere like here. This is going to be my guide for Jamie. If we go down to the end of this sequence, turn our preview effects on, we're just going to move this across, and essentially that is going to be my endpoint. So what we've got now is we've got like a nice little animation. Now what's nice about this is that we can really quickly go through and just refine this. So I'm just going to put a little bit more of a zoom on this. We want to like a little bit of a push in on this sequence, and now you can see we've got a nice little zoom across. If we go to about halfway, we could just dolly out on this, so we've got some kind of animation that now just sort of starts to zoom out, takes in the establishing shot, and zooms back in again. Now once we've done that, if we exit this point, you can see that that animation is now contained within our timeline, directly on that segment. So a really quick way of going through and adding some sort of elements to this. Now we've got lots of other things that we need to animate into this. So this next sequence here, you can see we've got 3 poses on one board. Now once again, if we just take the same sort of principle here, we're just going to mark an in point to here, and we're just sort of kind of roughly, because we've got one prepared up on this one. We're going to take this and edit this once again straight into here. Now pretty much the same thing that we've done on the previous one, but what's really nice about this is that we can quickly go through, add that axis effect, and cut this up and reposition it. So in this case, we would go through, add an axis effect straight off, and before I would go and position this, we can come in here and you can see that we've got contextual menus for pretty much everything. So we can literally go through and we can just add some cut points really quickly, go into those, and once again, as we had before, adjust those positions. So lots of different ways of doing things very, very quickly within the timeline. Now, we're slightly pushed for time, and I'd really like to hand this over to Jamie. So what we've got is we've got an animatic version that is actually complete. So we're just going to close down this particular one, and we're going to drag this one down. You can see that essentially, come to our viewer here, we've just taken that a step further. Here's our initial pan across. We've got our sort of like little cut frames going on here, those 3 different poses. This actually is quite interesting. We've got, down on this particular layer, we've got those sequences, and we've got some camera shake on this as well. Now, this is going to introduce us to something that we're going to look at when we come back from the 3D side, which is called a Connect Effects. Now, Connect Effects, just to tease you, as it were, is a way of doing procedural compositing within this non-linear editing environment. So in this particular case, we've got this shot, we've put a little camera shake on here. We've taken that into an action just to reframe it. We've got our camera shake, and this feeds back out to the timeline. So bear this in mind, because we're going to be looking at this Connect Effects in a lot more detail when we come back. At this point, I would like to give my masterpiece to Jamie, who's going to do some animation on this. And once again, it's really easy to start importing and exporting this kind of media. So this is my work in progress so far. This is my clip I'm going to hand over to Jamie. This is all laid out in frames, because 3D guys like frames very much. We can go to our media hub here, and we've got a little bookmark that's going to be for our exports, if I'm going to find that for a second. Inside of here, all we really have to do is take that file, drag it out, and it intelligently knows that we need to export this, and it basically just brings up this pop-up. We can export it as a sequence, a movie, whatever we want to do, and that happens in the background. At that point, it would magically whisk across to Jamie.
Now it comes over, sorry.
Sorry, now it thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was seamless. And Jamie's going to talk through some of the 3D animation before he hands back.
Yeah, so I'm just really glad that the audio is... I'm just messing with you, sorry. So we're into 3ds Max now, so this is the 3D side. He's done kind of a little bit of work, which if you work with editors, graders, compers, you'll know they turn up, they do a little bit of work, and then they disappear again. So he hands it over now to me, to the 3D side of things, to do kind of all the nice, shiny glitz and glamour. Then they're going with it, so that's kind of all right.
Are they believing it so far?
Well, they're not booing.
There's a couple of people over here. I think they bought it. I'll tell you.
Yeah. So basically now we're in a full 3D environment. So this is our 3D kind of clay model that we're going to work with. Now the end result is the one that you're looking at on your left-hand side. And basically you can see we've got this kind of inbuilt animation. So that's what we're kind of aiming for. So what we're going to do is start working on this kind of base model over here. And let's just kind of push him across so it's a bit of a focus. And inside of 3ds Max, or pretty much any of our animation packages like Maya or Softimage, all full 3D, high-end 3D applications, the workflow is very similar. So what I'm going to do is, with that one selected, I'm just going to quickly hold down my Shift key, and I'm just going to position that off to one side. Let's give it a bit more of a space. Let's go about there. And I'll just, in this case, make, say, 3 copies. Now, the basic principle of working like this is pretty similar. All we need to do is kind of inbuild a nice simple workflow that allows me to grab key areas and control it in a nice modular fashion. So what I'm going to do is go in and just decide what I want to change on these individual models. So for this particular case, I'm probably going to go in and select the little blue dots, what we call the verts. This is like a giant dot-to-dot of how this model is constructed. So from there, I want to give it a bit of a raised eyebrow expression. So I could individually go through and select each one, which will take a ridiculous amount of time and really is not something that I want to do. So we have some techniques called soft selection that just kind of allows me to make a bit of a fall off. And this is like a heat map. So pretty much, you know, what's bright red is the strong areas of focus, and then it cools off as it gets further away. So from that stage, I'm just going to slightly raise up its eyebrow. Then what I'll do is I'll come over to the next model. Now, over here, I want to do something simple, like maybe give it a mouth talk. So go back in, turn on my soft selection again, And this time I'm going to select a key area of the mouth, the top area, because I want to get that nice kind of phonetic talking. But you can see kind of a common problem that we have in 3D. And that's this, where it doesn't quite understand the fall off. If you think of it as like a splodge is a technical term if you're taking notes. From there, what it's doing is it's looking at everything around it. Now, areas like mouths are often common problem areas for 3D people.
And armpits.
And armpits.
And other areas which
we
we're
won't
not going
talk
to
about
mention.
the other areas. Yeah. So basically, any areas like that are often a bit of a problem area. So what I can do is turn on these simple little options. Now, the nice thing about these tools are it's full of options. And when you start to learn a 3D application, obviously that's the thing that scares you. But further down the line, that's the thing you're really grateful of, having all these options that allow you to go in and just with a simple tick, tell the application to ignore the fact that it's missing that bottom lip. That's a good thing. That's what we want it to do. So from there, we can come in and say, well, actually, I'll move it down and get that nice kind of expression. Yeah? It's a simple thing, but it's a huge, huge time saver that you get with our 3D tools. So let's just quickly go in. I'll give it a slightly different selection on the other mouth. Let's do the same thing. Turn on soft selection. Turn on that handy little tick box option. Stewie's had enough. He's off.
No, just stretching my legs a little bit, yeah.
Well, you are
That's
old.
good. Yeah, I am very.
Let's kind of pull that up about there. Let's maybe give it just a little bit more of a soft selection and say something like that. Now, you can clearly see why I'm not employed in animation anymore. So ignore that, but understand the principle.
It looks a lot better than last time.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I think. Now, the problem we've got, of course, is each individual head has got separate poses. But that's what we want it to have to get to this end result over here, to allow me to kind of build up that squawking that it does in the animation. Squawking.
Doesn't really speak. It's sort of like a, yeah. Squawk.
So inside of our 3D applications, some of the strong points that we have are these drop-down menus. Now, this is context sensitive, like you saw with Smoke earlier. So it changes all of these options based on the type of models that you're working with and the type of tools you're working with. Now, in this case, I'm going to look for something called a morpher. Now, what the morpher is going to do is allow me to take all of these models, pull them into one, and allow me to remember and pull around, but merge them together. So what it's going to do is, let's just pick that up there, and let's load multiple options. We get a big scary interface appear. So this is when you want your boss to walk past, so he understands why he pays you so much money for doing what you're doing. Now we've got all of these models, these three models here, loaded into this one object. So I can delete them completely out of my scene because this now is a 100% scaling value. So that allows me to come in and start blending these together. So at any point I can individually tweak what's going on. Now it's a really simple little thing, but we load in the audio track that Stuart just worked with. We turn on our auto key, like you saw earlier inside of Smoke, exact same terminology, and it now records everything I do. So at the bottom of your screen where it's turned red, that's your timeline. So anything I do now gets recorded. So if I just kind of raise its eye a little bit, let's pull it across over here, let's go through, give it that mouth option, let's just quickly go in, close the mouth, come back again, and start kind of building up the sequence manually, but with this nice amount of control, which is, of course, exactly what I want when I'm doing 3D work. So everything we're doing here is just a really simple turn on, animate, turn off option. So when I get to this stage here at the end of my animation sequence, I've got my little character that then starts to go through and starts to get its mouth talking. That's all good. So that's the animation stage. You like that?
I love it.
Thanks.
I always love the stuff you do.
Cheers. You're mocking me, but cheers.
I'm not.
So let's jump into the actual kind of final end stage. So we'll go back to the clip that we was just working with a second ago. We'll ignore that little message there because that's what we call a picnic error. So that's problem in chair, not in computer. That means I forgot to load a file. So we ignore that very quickly. And this is the final end result that we saw working on his machine. So we need to render this off. It's got all the inbuilt animation that you saw a minute ago, going through exactly the same process that we just went through on the face. But this time we bring up one of the scariest looking windows. But all we care about is what file we want it to be, what final output size frame that we want, and it's full of all the presets that you would expect. I'm going to leave it default options, but this is the key critical area. This is something called render elements. So rather than rendering a flat image, we render the image, but break it down into its individual components. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hit the big magic render button. We make them big buttons for a reason, so people like Stuart can use it.
Visually challenged, I believe is a word.
Yeah, at least you're not wearing any glasses today.
No, I'm not, no. I've got to find my way back to the table in a minute, though. That's going to be a bit challenging for me.
Thanks. So what we do is we now tell it to look at the resources on your machine. So the nice thing about these 3D applications, along with our compin editing applications, is it sucks all the resources you've got available to you. So as many processes as you have on your machine, it's going to see them. So what we're seeing on screen at the moment is it's going through, gives us a blocky version of the end output first of all, so we kind of get a rough idea to make sure we've rendered the right camera, the right view, everything kind of looks all right. And then you see these squares, these boxes moving around screen. So each one of those boxes is a processor on your machine. So the more processors you have, quicker you get that image. So when it gets to the end, the big green bar that's moving across, once it gets to the end, it throws out all of these components that you can see appearing. Now, what these components are the things that's going to make Stuart happy. So this is our description of how the lighting is working from all around, our ambient lighting on the 3D model. This is something called Z-depth, so white up close to the camera, black far away. It's giving us 3D information into a 2D image. So this is how you do all your effects like fog, smoke, out of focus effects. Here, this is a velocity pass, so the brighter the color means those objects are moving faster than the ones that are gray in the background, so it gives us a description if you wanted to do things like motion blur, wheels blurred on a car, things like that. From there, we've got a shadow pass. It's black because?
It's a matte, and it's black, and it's got a matte.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
It's a black shadow on a black area, so of course it comes out black because we can't see it yet until we bring it into smoke. Now this is a key area for us when we're doing these types of animations or children's episodic type workflows. The eyes are always a key area, so we separate out the objects we want that we might want to tweak when we kick them into the editing application. Then a reflection pass, object IDs, which are like a stencil for all of the objects that we're seeing, allowing us to do selective color correction. Matte is pretty much the same principle. And then a light from the top, so it allows us to blend our lighting with our shadows and pass all that information across. And then diffuse is the final description of all the materials with no lights, no shadows, to allow us to make some, again, selective color tweaks. Because this rendering process, you have to render each one of these frames 25 times for every 1 second of animation. So anything we can do tweaking-wise in the comping editing application saves us a huge amount of time. Because in 3D, that process is the biggest bottleneck you're going to face in the 3D workflow. So on that note, I'm now going to pass you over to this man.
And as Joe was saying, that's really important because although you may be tempted to render this as a flat scene, the overhead and then the lack of flexibility that you're going to have after that event means that if there's changing to be done, if there's changing the depth or the motion, you're going to have to go all the way back to this and you're going to have to kick off a major long render again. Yep. So what this is really doing, you can see all those passes that came out happened really quickly, didn't they? They just pop out almost instantaneously.
Yeah. And the important thing that I'll just quickly describe whilst you're setting up, if we swap over to his machine now, we'll see that the files that I've rendered are, even though it split them out into individual frames that we saw on screen where we had a quick look, they're now one flat file. So our OpenEXR file format, remember that really nice file format we spoke about at the beginning, is pretty much like a database of all of these elements, but in one file. Because if you're anything like me in production, you have a really good habit of losing files, and that's the last thing you want when there's a deadline approaching.
The last thing you want?
The last thing
you want. So we're going to have to tear through this fairly briskly, but just to give you a rough idea how we got this media in, this is basically how it was rendered out of Max. Now, although this looks like it's only one file, if we swipe down here and look at kind of our information, it shows us that this is an OpenEXR file. And although this is showing you the comped final, we actually know that there are 26 video tracks or 26 layers of information embedded inside of that. So although you're seeing this as a final composite, we've actually got all those passes that Jamie did split out as separate layers which we have access to. Right, so we could drag this whole thing in one piece, Or, as we've done here, we've actually dragged in the individual elements. So here we've got Dave, we've got his ambient occlusion, we've got the motion vectors, ambient occlusion for the background, background pass, junkyard, all have come out of that embedded OpenEXR. Now, we're going to tear through this fairly briskly, but the whole point is that we're kind of round-tripping back to that animatic. This is the animatic we sent over to Jamie. So we kind of got that back, and this is the sort of area that we're going to start dropping that, that particular scene into. Now, you can drop this down a variety of ways. If we kind of select all these in one go, we can take these, we can drop these down as an edit. Now, what Smoke is going to do is it's going to treat this as a traditional non-linear editor. It's going to drop these down in this particular way. We can actually drop these down in a vertical stack. So basically, we've got all our elements are stacked up immediately above each other, right? And that's really handy if you start to do things like compositing. Now, in this particular case, one thing that Jamie was talking about was that although he's kind of rendered out these passes, so we're looking at these passes in a very much sort of top-down orientation. The top layer is the ambient occlusion, the next layer down is the actual color fill. You don't really want to render out things you don't have to. So things like the junkyard and the interior of the room are basically just static frames in this particular case. Now, once again, we can very quickly go through. We can use the editorial inside of here to very sort of quickly make a selection of these two things. In this particular case, we can come in and we can literally just stretch those completely out to where we need them to be. So we can actually just get that to stretch out for the whole length of that particular thing, right? Now, from there, we can do a rather clever thing. We're kind of going back to that connect effects that we were looking at before. Once again, we could work on a very sort of layer-based approach to this. We could put effects to each layer to blend these down. We could blend it across there. We've got this layer down here. We've got this layer down here. We could do that. But remember, we've got access to this procedural compositing. So we can actually come through here and we can kind of select all of these layers, and we can add what we call a connect effects, and we can generate automatically a composite based on those layers. Now, when it's done its crazy thing and the little beach ball is bounced and things have kind of settled down, we get this. Now, what this is basically all those layers have now been broken out to their separate elements and have been promoted into a thing that we call connect effects, which is our procedural compositing. All these nodes are basically all the resize and soft effects that were applied directly in the timeline. And this frightened Jamie to start with, didn't it? You've got this kind of crazy split image. And this is just kind of indicating that for each one of these, we potentially also have a matte included in that clip, all right? And it's taken all of these and it's put them in something called an action. Now, this is basically our connect effects schematic. This is kind of showing us an overview of what's happening inside of here. But this little node here, our action, if we kind of toggle into that, is basically a whole 3D workspace. Okay, if you kind of look at what we've got here, we've got a camera, we've got our elements, and if we look at this and basically just come through and quickly orbit here, you can see that we've got a full 3D environment. Okay. Now, this is going to be useful for us in several different ways. If we kind of view it through here, you can see that we've got a virtual camera filming our scene and we've got our elements laid out in Z-Space. Now, we're going to use this Z-Space to our advantage in a particular way, and we're just going to graphically just rearrange some of these things so it makes a little bit more sense. So things like Dave would be on top, the background will be like on the bottom, and we're going to have this. This actually doesn't really have a lot of relationship to the way that the order of the scene is in the composite, because we can actually just use a priority editor to go through and reorganize these to take them in the order that we want to. But we're going to use this and start working with some of the Z depth. So, just to make this a little bit more obvious, we're going to initially just select these two. We're just going to hide these, and we're going to create a bit of Z depth with this. In fact, we're also going to hide this one. Now, if we look at our scene through here, this axis effect basically controls all the position of where this is living in Z space. Now, if we look at it from the camera's point of view very quickly, if we zoom this up towards camera, it's going to do a bad thing. It's actually going to make it bigger, and we don't really want it to be bigger. Okay, we need it to create some Z space, but we want it to keep relatively the same size. So we can actually use some tools inside of here that are really good. On these axes, we can actually go through and do what we call a positional change, an auto scale. So it really means that now, when we come through and we move this forward in Z space, although we are creating some depth between those elements, you can see here, if we look at it from the camera's point of view, we are actually maintaining the same relative size. It just does an auto scale down the cone of the camera, which is kind of really useful. Now, of course, once we've got one thing attached, we really need to have the ambient occlusion as well. Now, at the moment, the ambient occlusion, excuse me, is still back here. We've only moved one element. And this is real beauty of working with this nodal-based system. You can see how this is connected to our texture. It's very simple for me to come through here and just parent that to that other element, and it will automatically pop to that location. This is basically now the parent of this object. So anything we do here is basically moving both things at one go. Coming back to our camera view for a second. Now, obviously, what we need to do is we need to apply some kind of blending mode to this, so we can come into here. This is going to be an ambient occlusion. Multiply normally works better.
Yeah,
multiply
like screen, something like that.
Something like that. And you can see here that just playing around with the transparency as that multiply, you've got control about how that affects. Now, we're going to go through very quickly and add those other elements. We actually want to do the similar sort of thing here for Dave. We come back into our perspective view for a moment, just so you can kind of see a little bit better what's happening. If we come through and turn both of these guys on, you can see they're occupying that space down there. Now, we've got a bin down here of tools that we can use inside of Action, as well as inside of the Connect Effects. And we're actually going to just pop out a new Axis tool and just approach it slightly differently. We know that both of these need to move in the same place. So once again, we can turn that auto scaling on. This is now the parent of both things, and we can now just literally drag that forward in Z space there. Looking back from our camera perspective, and once again, changes to our Photoshop blend mode, come into multiply, and there we have control over the ambient occlusion on this. So this really sort of gives you a lot of opportunity to fine-tune things. The other thing that you've got in here is, why are we using Z space? So as soon as you've created some kind of Z space, this camera will start to react with that. So if we, for argument's sake, took our camera view and started to zoom in and out, you can see that automatically we've got that parallax effect that you're going to find because you've got Z space between those elements. So things like little camera trackings, little moves, you can add after the 3D render. You don't have to bake that move into the actual original pass. You can do lots of these little tweaks. The other thing that we're going to do before we go to our preloaded one of this is that there's lots of other objects that we can add inside of this scene. And one of these is going to be a light. Now, Jamie really loves this, and I shall let him explain why he loves this. When we start a place, we're going to bring these back for a second, because this kind of really resonated with you, I think is the word we're looking for.
I like resonate. Yeah, resonate's a big word. Let's go with that. Basically, anything like this, if you try and do in 3D, you'll know that it can be a bit of a pain point, because you have to load it, you do the render, and then you wait and see the end result, and you can often wait a good few minutes before you see what happens. One of the really nice things about Smoke, because you're working in this full 3D environment all the time without any additional third-party plugins, is Stuart throws in his light, which is the big white splodge, again, splodge technical term, that you can see on screen at the moment. And you can do simple things like relighting at the moment, but it is a full 3D environment. So I don't want to take away your glory.
No, that's fine. But this is kind of really important, because we're dealing with these big OpenEXL files, which are like 16-bit. It gives you a huge amount of dynamic range on the color. So you can sort of really bring exposure up on things, which once again is something, if you want to do it in 3D, you'd have to do as a render pass, which would take time, yada, yada, yada. Now, we've got some space here. We've actually just put a light at the front, which we can sort of light layers. And once again, depending on where you move this in Z space, it's going to light those particular layers or not. Now, the other nice thing about this is that we can also link these lights to different things. But most importantly, if we just come through and duplicate this light, we can do actually something really special-ish. If we look at our top view or our side view of this, we're going to take that duplicated light and we're going to move it down towards the background. So this is like another view, kind of shows what we're doing here. We look at our camera view again. Now, the reason that we've done this is that all these objects, all these things that we're putting in our side of our action composite, we can actually attach other elements to. Now, in this particular case, we've put a thing on here called a raise element. And what a raise element does is it allows us to start to extrapolate in 3D space. I'm going to hide these to make this a bit more apparent for a second. We're just going to look at our top view here. It's going to allow us to basically bring in some lighting information into our scene here. So we're going to grab hold of our pivot, and you can see here if we start to manipulate this and we start to bring this in, actually we're going to turn that off so we just have that coming as free. You can see that we can start to get true volumetric light in our 3D scene. We've got some light rays that are really sort of coming out from that point there, and we can start to stream those through that area using the mat. Right? Now what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to very quickly add some things that in 3D would take a long time. Volumetric light, shadow casting, ray casting is something that takes an awful long time to process in 3D. Now what we've got is we've taken this on a stage further where we've got a couple of things that are built that just really sort of shows you the end process that we're going to have. So we're going to go into this particular Kinect Effects. It's exactly the same sort of setup that we just had, except in this particular case we've just nudged it on a slightly a few steps further where we've positioned our light and taken that down. So here you can see we've got exactly the same setup. Here's our light, here's our rays, and if we kind of orbit in our camera view, you can see now that we've got true volumetric light coming through this. Now what's really important about this is that as you start to go through this scene, the butterfly that Dave's playing around with actually starts to intersect with that light ray. And once again, this is something that's quite difficult to do in 3D, is to basically start to use the color coming through an object. So you can see here that we can actually take the attributes of that butterfly and use the rays to literally shine through those and do volumetric lighting.
And this is quite a big moment. If you haven't done 3D before, then this might be a bit of a so what moment for you. But to do that type of thing in 3D is a massive headache. You know, it takes a lot of time to get half that result. So if we were showing you this in America, you'd be whooping, you'd be hugging, you'd be cheering over here.
I mean, you may do that later. I mean, you know,
maybe.
Maybe not.
But that is a huge, huge time saver. If you have people that are making 3D content for you, then trust me, that is a massive time-saving feature. To do that in 3D is literally half a day of just tweaking, playing with settings and trying to get to that same result. In here, you just do it real time with no additional plugins, and he does all the work, so I get to go home early. Everybody's happy.
So this about wraps it up for us. This is like the logical conclusion of what you would do with this. In this particular case, we've actually generated multiple outputs from our action. So inside of here, we've got several outputs. We kind of look at our result view. We've got Dave on his own, Dave mat, the room mats. We've got light passes that are coming out. And the really nice thing about this is that what that means is that as well as things feeding into action, we can also then take multiple outputs coming out. So to give the final look on this, we've taken several outputs. We've blurred a couple of these. We've put another blur on the background. We've taken it into a mux node. We've recomped these elements together using the blurred passes as an overlay, which is kind of quite nice. We've got basically our rays here, which when we've recomped over the top again. Once again, if you look at the different points when we contextually tap on them, you can see that we can recomp things. Jamie loves this, little things like damage, where we can put like a little vignette on. But to basically just completely fine-tune the end result. This is where we started off, which looked quite nice initially. But when you look at the final treatment that you do by using this process tree, you can really sort of develop and work the image. We're kind of done now, so I hope that's given you a slight insight into what you can potentially do with the systems. Any questions, you can sort of grab us when we run away, I guess.
Yeah, so on that note, just a quick reminder, there's a free trial of that software that Stuart's been working with, so grab the card. It's a fully working trial. It's not watermarked. It's not limited in any way. So grab the trial, go through the workflow that we've kind of shown you. Again, a huge thanks to Hatch Studios, the company that made this work. Thanks to all of you guys for pretending to be interested. That's always nice. And none of you fell asleep. Amazing.
Brilliant. I think actually they just came early for the next one.
Yeah, true. Yeah, all right, so thanks very much. We'll be around if you want to talk to us, but enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.